Hi, everybody. I'm excited today. I'm here with my friend Ryan. Um, he's been along with me on my journey, and he'll come up later in this episode as I talk about my spiritual journey. Thought it'd be a great first episode to talk about my journey and my spiritual story. And so it can kind of introduce what I'm about and kind of how I got to where I am. And yeah, so Ryan's just gonna ask me questions as I go. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Yep, glad to be here, Kendall.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm just gonna jump right in. Yeah, I grew up a Christian. It kind of would say evangelical adjacent. Um, I was baptized when I was 8. I took it really seriously. I read the whole Bible. I always had trouble though with the conflicting messages in the Bible. Um, and so I read a lot of fiction. I was really into reading. I love the imagination, the beauty within it, and I really liked Christian fiction. Frank Peretti, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien. Really enjoyed the intimate moments with God. And so I was never really a groupie type. I kind of always stood apart from the crowd. And that kind of made it hard for me growing up. I was bullied. I had some anxiety issues, some self esteem issues, some depressive episodes. So my parents started homeschooling me, and I had a hard time with school. I had a hard time sitting still. I was really ADHD, but I really like learning. But I wanted to make friends, and I just felt kind of lonely in homeschool. So in fourth grade, I started going to private school, and that's where the bullying kind of started. It was kind of funny because I wanted to make friends, but I didn't really find friends. I found bullying instead. So I was kind of a lonely kid. And yeah, we talked about faith in school some, and that was good. But it was really easy to just kind of go with the crowd because it was a Christian private school. And then I started to get into basketball, and so in high school, I decided to start going to public school because we didn't really have a basketball program. And so in public school, I really had to choose my own faith, and I started appreciating the blessings I had in life and how much harder a lot of people had their own lives, and they didn't have good family support. And so I started to take my faith more seriously and really choose it and make it my own. And then for college, I decided to go to the local Christian college. And I thought about being a theology major or a psychology major, but I was scared of the science and psychology. And like I said, I had issues with the Bible and theology. And I just thought that if I became a theology major, that I would get very dogmatic and just all the different issues. Like it didn't connect with me in the heart. And yeah, it was just really hard for me. So I became an English major instead because of my love for fiction and reading. So in college, I had trouble again, with concentration, and eventually I was diagnosed with ADHD. I started taking Adderall for that. And then my senior year, I had a senior research project, and I started getting really anxious about that. And I started going to counseling, and my first counselor taught me meditation, and that was really helpful. Eventually graduated. I went to apologetics camp called Summit Ministries, and that kind of was another step in my faith journey. Just learning about all the different issues that Christianity focuses on, our culture specifically, kind of really connected with me intellectually, and that was exciting. And then after that, I went to grad school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was an American Studies major. I took English, history, and journalism classes. And I took a class called, in Bible's Literature is a class where we analyze the Bible in a historical analytical lens, and that was really hard for me because I never read the Bible in this way, and it was challenging a lot of my beliefs. And but I knew as a former English major that you read books in their genre, in their context, and it made sense. So I couldn't reject it, and so I didn't like it, and it was hard for me, but it was also good for me. I think it was a step in my faith journey. At this time, I started getting interested in charismatic Christianity because I came from a Church of Christ background, and the charismatic elements were not really a part of my faith growing up. And at that point in my life, I just felt like my faith was it felt kind of dry. It felt kind of disconnected from the heart. And I started wondering things about like the gifts of the Spirit and are those still going on, and why isn't that more of an emphasis? And so that was a part of my journey. But grad school was really hard for me. It was the first time I was away from home. I had imposter syndrome, like a lot of grad students. A lot of perfectionism issues, anxiety, again, depression. I wasn't really responding well to all of this. I started kind of messing around, had a lot of procrastination issues. And so after my first year of grad school, I started kind of looking at myself and feeling like, man, I need to get my stuff together. This isn't really who I am. So in my second year, I started praying a lot. I started reading the Bible, meditating, listening to Christian music. I was really trying to get close to God and improve my mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And I did, and it was helpful. But at the end of the semester, I still felt like I had so far to go. I was really discouraged. Kind of growing up, when I thought about being an adult and what I was going to do with my life, I couldn't really see it. I just kind of thought my life just felt like a black hole, and so I still kind of had this image in my mind. My friend, she sent me an article on trauma on this website called Brain Pickings, and it kind of talked about how to heal trauma. You had to experience it in a new way and see the more positives. And that really resonated with me. And so I kept reading this website, and I read this website from about 8 in the morning till 4:30 at night, which is pretty crazy. I could read a book all day, but I never done this for this long. I kind of got in the flow and just kind of lost track of time. And when you have those feelings of something makes sense, the light bulb comes on. You get this feeling of euphoria in your body. That's kind of what happened to me over and over again. And I think it was kind of like an act of grace, of me telling myself, oh, other people have gone through hard things like yourself, and you're just being really hard on yourself. You don't need to be, and that it's okay, and you're not alone. And also that yeah, I just felt this kind of sense of oneness, of connectedness with others throughout time, and these great writers and thinkers, and these poets who had learned to kind of transmute their pain into beautiful prose and lessons they learned. And so by the end of the night, I realized, it's time to go to sleep. So I went up to my room. I started doing this meditation from the top of my body down to my toes, just kind of relax and go to sleep. But instead of relaxing, it's like I connected my head with the rest of my body, and I started shaking. And I just had this unbelievable sense of love, joy, and peace, and just ecstasy. And I felt like it was God, and it just felt amazing. And I felt like I heard God talking a little bit to me in my head. And I was just like, wow, it's amazing. And I just went to sleep after that. In the morning, I still felt the same way. I was, again, I was on Adderall for ADHD, and I just went off of that cold turkey. And And I was wondering like what happened to me. And so I just had this, what I could think of in my head was spiritual ecstasy. So I searched online and I found Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross and the Christian mystics, and they had their own experiences with God. And so I was like, oh, that's what it was. I just had lots of thoughts. I started journaling like crazy. I had a lot of energy. And I just felt like I was kind of like in sync with God, and I was hearing Him, and I wasn't really questioning anything. I was just kind of going on intuition and instinct, and there was all these funny synchronicities, you could say. Like one day I was with my friend, and I just felt like I should give him $1, so I did. And he's like, "Oh, thanks, man. I'll use this at a coffee shop." And the next day I was at that same coffee shop to see my life coach because I felt like it was time to move on from that. And I was waiting for him, and I hear the barista say, "Ken," and I was like, "Well, my name is Kendall. I didn't order coffee, whatever." And they said it again, so I was like, "Okay." And they said it one more time, and I was like, "All right, whatever." And so I went up there, and I was like, "Hey, my name's Kendall. I didn't order this coffee." They're just like, "I don't know. It happens sometimes." And so I took the coffee. It was just like this $1 cup coffee. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. That's synchronicity, you could say. And then my life coach showed up, and I talked to him, and he was like, yeah, God told me that you're moving on. So it was really amazing. It was like God already told him. I didn't even have to say anything. So it was just like boom, boom, synchronicity after synchronicity. And so I had the winter break to kind of explore. I went back home. I was at Christmas with my family, and my cousin was playing some music, and it was just so beautiful to me. I started crying. It's like I was very like sensitive to everything during this time. And like I said, I had a lot of energy. I probably was getting like 6 hours of sleep a night. I was eating healthier. It almost felt like my taste buds changed. And I just had this sense that God was in everything and in everyone. And I was doing these weird things, like I got a graph and I plotted X and Y axis, space and time. So I was kind of thinking about metaphysics for some reason. I was talking to a lot of my Christian friends. Some of my charismatic Christian friends, they said that I've been baptized by fire by the Holy Spirit, like at Pentecost. And then more traditional Christians were just kind of like, that's interesting, but they urged cautiousness. So after winter break finished, I was driving back to Waco. I drove past a graveyard and had images in my head of people digging themselves out of the graves. Not like a zombie, but like I just had a thought like death is not final. We live more than once. So back at Baylor, I had another couple days. I just had my senior research project to write, and so I didn't have any classes, so it was kind of free. Again, I didn't feel very sleepy or very hungry, so I didn't eat or sleep much. I just thought, oh, I'm fasting. So I probably started getting like 4 hours of sleep per day. And yeah, I just, during this whole time had tons of thoughts and feelings. But it's like I could handle it. I felt more it was all positive, where before in my life I had a lot of thoughts, but it was very, very negative, very hard to handle everything. So I was talking to a lot of people. I kind of felt like I was communing with them. I talked to an atheist. He kind of told me his views of religion and his problems, and it didn't bother me at all. I just felt like, oh, that makes sense. He's had this certain issues, and that makes sense. I understand why he feels like this. So really, like, no one bothered me. I just felt like I could see God's spirit in everybody. And I kind of had the sense that I was like, I wonder if this is heaven. Like, we're already in heaven. We just don't realize it. Like once I was on the highway and I was going the speed limit, and all these other cars were going the speed limit, and it felt like we were like unified. And I wondered if we learned and followed the laws of the universe, everything would be in harmony and there would be no suffering. and this would be a sort of heaven on earth. Um, and there's just this weird experiences. Like one time I looked at the sun and all the clouds around it kind of just dissipated, and it just felt like it was giving me energy, and it didn't bother me. And I also was like looking at the trees, and I was seeing how they were shaped, and I just had a thought like if you study them long enough, you could see the wind patterns and how they shape the trees. So it's just like I was really looking into things and thinking these odd thoughts. One time, I just had a feeling I should grab this book that was in our community room where I was staying, and I grabbed this book, and inside it said, "Congratulations for completing a Master of Divinity," and I just felt like God was telling me, "You're having these experiences, and so you don't need to go get a degree in theology. You're like experiencing it." I was very in the moment, not worrying about the future, agonizing the past at all, like I had done most of my life in the past. Um, but I did think that that sleep and not eating was starting to get to me, and I was starting to get kind of out of it and kind of loopy. And so after the third day of this back at Baylor, my roommate he took me to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, I just saw how many stories there were, and I was just like, oh, this is just like layers of heaven. But at the hospital, they diagnosed me with bipolar. They said I had a manic attack. They put me on medicine. I went to the psych ward, and I went home for a while to recover. And it was very, very confusing time. I After I started taking medicine, I kind of came down from that whole experience, and I actually felt like the opposite. I felt very disconnected from God. I felt very negative and had a lot of depression. Kind of went through the dark night of the soul, and I was very confused about my experience. I wondered, was that real? Was that mania? Was it both? I really didn't know, and I kind of had to figure out my life after that. I did finish grad school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, anyways. I did have to kind of recover my brain, and just focus on getting a job and figuring out what I was going to do. And I was on meds for a while, and that kind of made me feel like a zombie. Like I couldn't really feel my emotions strongly, and I kind of went through, you would say, like an emotional deconstruction. Like I didn't really think it out intellectually, but it just felt so hard to go to church and to read the Bible. The Christianity I grew up with just didn't seem to connect with me any longer, and I don't know, I was just having a really hard time with that. Um, Eventually, I got off the medicine, and they told me that I needed to be on meds the rest of my life, and kind of talking about mental health and the whole medical Western community. It's another podcast episode. But once I went off the meds and really, worked on myself, and try to do healthy things, do it from a more natural way to make sure I didn't go manic again, which I didn't. And I started being able to feel my emotions, and I felt like I was starting to make progress. And started going counseling again. And eventually, I figured out that I wanted to go back to grad school for counseling. And I knew that this time in grad school, I really wanted to do things the right way and be healthy, and that if I was gonna be a counselor, I needed to be well so that I could help others well. Um, and in grad school, my first counselor had recommended this book to me, and it was a book about near death experiences. And so I read this book, and I realized that a lot of experiences people had and realizations they had in near death experiences were some of the same ones that I had in my own experience back at Baylor, back with my own experience with God. And so I thought, oh, maybe there's something to this. And at that time, I'd gotten a mentor, and I started reading the Bible and going to church again, and I was starting to get my faith back. And my mentor mentioned to me that Ryan, who used to be a missionary for our church, had gone through his own kind of spiritual journey and had, some of these same questions and thoughts that I had. And so I started talking to him, and he started recommending books to me, and we started talking about things. And I also started finding a lot of people on the internet who had been going through the same process. We are going through a cultural deconstruction and reconstruction of Christianity. And so that was very beneficial and helpful to me. And so I hope to have some of these people on the podcast, but that's kind of where I'm at now. And so this podcast is kind of to continue these conversations and talk about all these things.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's a lot of really interesting stuff and a really good story. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. Of course, I have several questions, and I think just primarily to help us as your listeners be able to understand better kind of what you were going through. And you explained it all very well, but just help us have a better feel for it. So first thing is, when you started to have the more lucid experience, like being aware of, as you termed it, of God and everything and everyone, etc., what period of time was that enjoyable experience lasted before having to go to the psych ward, etc.?
Yeah, that was about, say, around a month.
Around a month, okay. And then, so what happened? What do you feel happened? Can you recall that you said you started to feel loopy? How would you explain, like, what did you feel happened there?
Yeah, I think, what the doctors say is that going off of Adderall cold turkey can cause mania itself.
Oh.
So, one possible explanation is I had a experience with God, and then B, I went off of Adderall, and that caused the mania. And that could be intermixed with the after effects of my experience with God as well. And so, of course, also not getting sleep and eating is going to affect all that. And so even though, I felt very energetic, maybe that could mask the sense of, I actually need sleep,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so it's like you were in kind of a state of euphoria and or just you were feeling good, being fed by a different kind of energy and a different kind of like experience of I'm good, everything's fine.
Right.
And then so that kind of took a toll on maybe your body, the way that your brain functions since it had been working off of Adderall, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, gotcha. Because I was curious because, good of your friend to help you out and to take you somewhere. But I was wondering, like, even it seemed like when you showed up at wherever it was you were there in Waco, you still had an awareness that a more lucid experience. Like you said, your experience of that building was like the levels of heaven,
right?
Which is pretty funny, pretty funny experience. So you still had some like lucidity or some awareness, even like when you got there, yeah.
Yeah. I was aware throughout to some degree, but I did have moments where I kind of where my feeling kind of switched, where I kind of had this paranoia, like, oh man, I kind of feel like this is starting to take a toll on my body, and also like, where's I was like leaving things around and was like, oh, I'll find them later, and so it was kind of like, man, I'm starting to get disorganized, and like, where's my key? I could get locked out, and just some like warning signs, like maybe I'm getting a little too far out there,
Gotcha. So maybe in a way, not is the getting too far out there by way of not feeling grounded,
right?
Not feeling organized, and not able to kind of hold both together of just the simple daily tasks, making sure you don't lose your keys and such,
right?
While also having a very interesting experience. Okay, so then would you say it's pretty accurate to say the medicine that you started taking at that place wherever you went in Waco it started to effectively shut a lot of that lucidity down.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good explanation of why that stopped. Also, I'm not sure if anybody can sustain that level of
Yeah.
of how much thoughts I had and that high feeling of joy and love and all that stuff. I just don't know if that's sustainable. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it was like you were a conduit of energy and you weren't grounded. So like you were unendingly a whole bunch of energy passing through you, your mind, your body, whatever. And I mean, understandably, that current can only keep going for so long without being grounded. So
Right.
I mean, that's understandable. So then you said after that experience, you said you needed to take some time to recover your brain. What do you mean by that?
Oh, right. So after I was in the hospital and I started taking medicine, I did feel like my brain was slowed down a lot, and my thoughts are very simple and very slow. And when I talked, I kind of slurred my words some. And so it's hard to know, to me, how much that was the experience and that hurting me versus that's the meds. I don't know. It's hard to.
Oh, okay. Wait. When you say that experience and hurting me, what do you mean? The experience of
Hurting me.
lucidity?
Yeah. And just how much I was thinking,
Okay.
and just like the sleep and the
So
eating.
it was kind of like a crash, for lack of better words.
Right.
And it's hard to know whether it was the crash that was really affecting, kind of the slowing down, or the meds.
Or some of both.
Probably both. And most likely, I was feeling, as you were saying that, I mean, I don't know what medicine you're taking, and I'm not an expert in medicine, but, you just generally feel if they had thought. So this is part of the question that I have. Sure. And it's the question of what was your experience of hearing that they thought that you were bipolar?
Yeah. Well, at first, I was still in that euphoria state, so I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But as I think, as time went on and I came back down the earth, I think kind of growing up, and that self-esteem and the shame and anxiety, like that all kind of came back, and I was just like, oh, I proved what I thought was going to happen, that I was going to become an adult and just kind of crash and fail at life. And here I am, not feeling like I'm not living up to my potential. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I kind of have to like start over. And it took a long time to kind of get over that.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. So it feels like what I'm hearing you say is clearly to you, in your experience, there was a lot of repressed emotion, a lot of repressed shame, a lot of repressed, guilt and or fear, etc. And of course, that beginning to come out, or becoming aware of that, kind of as the other half of your lucidity, your lucid experience of you're okay, everyone's okay, etc. So would you feel that it's accurate? I mean, I'm just curious by way of a question. Do you feel that the diagnoses of bipolar and or mania is accurate?
Yeah.
Because now you're not bipolar.
Yeah. I kind of feel like this is a conversation for a whole nother podcast. So I don't get too much into it.
Okay.
I think that everybody can have mental illness if they are not doing well enough, and everybody can also not have it if they're doing really well. And I think that our kind of understanding of mental illness is you either have it or you don't, and it is kind of flawed. And we also are usually looking at the symptoms rather than what's the root and what's the cause, and viewing it under that more holistic lens. And so there's always a lot more to the story.
That's it. Well, no, that's a really good response. That's exactly kind of what I was feeling. Like, I know this is not my story, but what I was feeling about it was, as we know, with our very good friends who we appreciate, who are in the medical community, but still within the medical community, very keen to label things very quickly. and very keen to put a label on something so that they know how to frame it and how to give medicine to it, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was hearing from you is that it's a lot more of a fluid and interesting experience than just to put a label on it such that it was bipolar or manic. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
And to me, that's helpful because the way in which we label something, the way in which we name it affects the way that the way that we experience it. You know what I mean? So like hearing you give this whole story is really helpful, even just to me, because I had only ever heard, you mention your during the time that I was manic, et cetera, and that phrase is, there's nothing wrong with that phrase, but at the same time, what I've been trying to get at here is to ask, what is your felt experience of that? Like, do you feel that label is fair? And what I've heard from you here is more helpful because it feels like a lot more clear. It's a clearer trajectory from the lucidity of the high energy experience. If you want to say it this way, the part of you that was not remaining grounded during that experience that allowed you to be able to kind of be both both functionally, practically able to do what you need to do, but also having this experience that was out of the norm in terms of thoughts, in terms of awareness, et cetera. And then the other realization that there was a lot that had been repressed that most likely was coming up and needed to come up. And so like, it was all very fluid and all very helpful in a way, but in a way, like you said, maybe just because of the ungrounding, it just kind of came to a crashing halt, for lack of better words. And I think it's helpful to frame it all that way because that is not just very normal, but it's a very healthy set of experiences that happened, right? I mean, it's a very healthy trajectory and I say healthy by way of it helped you to be aware of maybe a tendency that you had, which was the desire to, if I can say it this way, the desire to be lucid, to have an experience that is outside of your normal experience, which up until that point had been a lot of depression and a lot of like anxiety, et cetera. So it was like the euphoria and the joy was even more like, man, I'm so glad to be experiencing this as opposed to what I've been experiencing before.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. Is that accurate? Or?
Yeah, that's totally accurate. I always had little moments, I guess, when I think back in my life of euphoric and intimacy with God and that kind of thing. And I'd always desired that. And I always desired the spectacular experience, which, is good and bad, sometimes that's there, sometimes that's not. And you have to also live life and appreciate it in its many forms. But
yeah, so one question I had thinking about your experience is how do you feel that this experience has helped you to think about your approach to not just daily life, but as it relates to spirituality in a way that is both grounded and able and willing to put yourself in a space to be more aware or to be more lucid? How have you found it to be helpful in a balanced kind of way?
Yeah, I think just trying to be holistic, just paying attention to the intellectual, the emotional, the physical, reading books from different perspectives, talking to people from different perspectives, practicing, meditation, prayer, communal worship at church, and therapy, just all the different ways that healing and growth.
Yeah, and you said several times throughout your story that you felt disconnected from your heart. What do you mean by that exactly? And like, how do you think about that now in terms of your practice?
I think that, it all stems, the heart is like central. It's the grounding. It's, I think about the fruits of the spirit, love, joy, peace. And I don't think of those as like emotions, though they can be, but they're more, the ground all below your emotions, which change second to second. And so if I can, when I'm feeling anxiety, when I'm feeling, overwhelmed or whatever, if I can pause and feel that love, joy, and peace underneath all those things within my spirit, that helps me ground me.
Yeah, I mean that's great. That's a great answer. Yeah, and so what would you say as well, like from the lucid experiences and whatnot, and all the way up until what we've called the kind of crash. What are the primary things as you look back on it that you feel that you learned from it? Like how? I mean, obviously, as I hear the whole story, there's a lot. I mean, it's a powerful experience. So, but how would you articulate just a couple things that you feel like have really impacted the way that you think and live here?
Yeah, it kind of blew apart my construction and understanding of reality.
Yeah.
And so it just made me more open to different people and different, whether it's politics, religion, different ways of thinking, and what I can gain from them, what they have to say, and also what all connects us together. And I think that we do have all this connection underneath all these ways we articulate our beliefs and everything like that. We all have felt experiences that are similar, and so I think that we're a lot more united, and there's that oneness below all these differences. And so I've come to really appreciate that, and also just I do think that underneath we all have that Spirit of God within us, and I think one thing Jesus really taught was to view people and see that Spirit of God, and to try to treat other people as that Spirit, and to bring that out in them, and to do the same thing for yourself.
Yeah, that's really good. Well said. I think like you've said just now and then before, it almost feels like it was a felt experience of the heart level, or you could say the Spirit of God within us, the kingdom of heaven within us, the shared ground of all of our being, which is that we live and move and have our being in God. And that felt experience of that gives a particular kind of grounding to the way that we perceive each other and we perceive events. And in a way, it gives the grounding that when we're in the headspace and trying to debate and talk and whatever, it delegitimizes our debates and our differences. Because even while you and I may disagree on any number of things, and you and anybody else may disagree on any number of things at the head level, at the heart level, we know that there's a connection and know that there's a sameness. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well said. I agree.
Yeah, that's good. So then after your experience, when you, of course, started to have to, you were having to take the meds and whatnot, and no doubt that was affecting, your ability to process. And as you said, you felt very kind of dry, not as in touch with not just, reality, but also not as in touch with your emotions, et cetera, et cetera. So as you started to work through that, though, you noted that you used the words, you started reading the Bible again, and you said, get my faith back. How would you experience your return to, for lack of better words? Yeah. I mean, because then you started going to church again and such. So like, how would you articulate your return to what felt like your faith from previous?
Right. I think that, reading these different books, talking to you and a lot of other people, I realized that there is a lot more varied understandings, different religions, but also within Christianity. And there was a lot more room to explore, and that it was okay, and getting past that shame and that fear of like, oh, I can't question, or I can't think this, or I can't believe this. And I think that part of my realization is that God, Jesus, they're more concerned about having a relationship with them rather than how much you understand or have everything right. And we won't ever have everything right. And so that just opened up a lot more freedom and joy and enjoyment in exploring these different things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. And I mean, it feels like part of that was, you got to experience some of what I think, as you described. I mean, not that just pure lucidity and thoughts and awarenesses outside of the norm or outside of our normal experience are a fruit of the Spirit, but more you experience a lot of joy, a lot of peace, a lot of patience and kindness with other people, etc. So it feels like you had experienced a lot of what maybe I'll just say as best as we can think of what it feels like to experience life from within the ground of the fruit of the Spirit, or within a very Spirit-filled and led life. And then returning to just reading and or some of the things that you had experienced before any of that lucid experience, I can see how it might feel a little bit dry, for lack of better words, where it feels like it's going back to the words and or the text, rather than that which feels like there's life within it, et cetera.
Right.
So I would say, I mean, that makes a lot of sense for your experience. And I mean, I think you've done well to be in a both and space, because this is what I was going to ask. I mean, of course, I know the answer to this question, but explain more for the listeners. Why is it that you didn't just stop going to church, stop reading the Bible, et cetera? So.
Yeah. Well, I won't say that it wasn't tempting.
Yeah.
I do think, for a while, I really craved that experience, and, not to say that I still don't to some degree. But, there's a lot more than just the highs to life. And I think it's really about, bringing the kingdom of heaven into your everyday, and every little thing can be special if we can have that perception and see that. And so that's really the goal, not to try to always find the high mountain, crazy high. But as far as church and the Bible and stuff like that, I do think that community is valuable and important. And, there's still things that those people can teach me. And, but I also think that, whatever our experience in life, whoever we are, what we've learned, it's important to try to share that and to try to help others, and teach from what you've experienced and what you've learned. And so I have a desire for that. I think church also helps keep me grounded as well.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's good. How would you? I think a helpful part of your story as well is, and maybe you could just say something about, like you just said, rightly so. I think a lot of people, we kind of look for all the highs. We do everything we can to make sure that we have these lucid, mystical experiences, etc. And not just are they not long lasting normally, but also that can become its own kind of form of attachment
Or escapism.
So I wanted to ask exactly that. Like, what has been your experience of, having had some of these experiences, but then coming back down, or there's no other way to say it, being in your day-to-day life, allowing and experiencing a lot of that which you had repressed and need to look at to come up in your relationships and in just, day-to-day life. What has that process been like, the willingness to actually look at that stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think it's been helpful to have all these people that have also had, been going through a growth, a deconstruction, reconstruction, or just, believing different religions and different paths. It's just given me the freedom to talk about these things and to ponder and question, without feeling like someone's going to be defensive or be like, you can't question that, or you can't believe that. And it's just openness and it's helpful for both of us.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, just for the listeners here, that we are collectively grateful. Kendall and I are at the same church, and the leadership at the church is fantastic, and they allow, they engage in a very helpful way all of these questions. And that has been one of the great, I think I can just say for both of us, but I know for you, if the church leadership was not like that, it would be a hard place to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to say that, having people like you and the leadership and some other people to talk about these things has really helped me be able to come back to church and make a better experience. And I just feel for people that are not finding that at church, and I understand why they would leave. And I think that maybe sometimes that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Well, yeah, before I move to another question as it relates to this last year of your life and where you're headed, is there any other just thoughts as it relates to what you've learned from this process and or looking back at your lucid experience here?
Yeah, I think just I'm just a lot more open to maybe there's a lot more modes of perception, or you could say like levels of consciousness there's that humans can have. And, while it's important, I think it's important to be grounded, but also be able to incorporate these high experiences or perception, and maybe that we can do that. And there's a lot more that can be helpful for us. And, maybe that's one of the things that Jesus called us to do. So that's something that I am exploring.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about your story, and as it relates to that, is, as we've already touched on, but I think it's worth noting here, is that it almost feels like a spiral. It almost feels like, you have an experience that in a way makes you feel higher than some of what normal day-to-day reality makes you feel. Like same for all of us. We have all of the mundaneness that we have and or get to experience every day. And some of it, depending on how we perceive it, can feel very like, I wish I had something else going on. Right. You know what I mean? And again, this is where some of the impulse of escapism comes from. And another term that's helpful is spiritual bypassing.
Right.
And it's the idea that, man, if I could just have my fingertips in heaven all the time, things would be much better. You know what I mean? And part of what's interesting about your experience is that it's kind of like a spiral of what really is the process, which is maybe glimpses of that for some people, yours maybe more than some of us, but glimpses of that. And then it's almost like a coming back down, and it's a reintegrating, a releasing of that which was holding us by way of repressed emotion and or, shadow work, for lack of better words. And then it's almost like it rises back up in a way, and then it comes back down. It's just like a continual process of experiencing both. And that feels like a more, I don't want to just say healthy, but it's a process that doesn't allow for any
stagnation.
Yeah, stagnation. Yeah, and or disassociation from experiences that we judge as bad, or we judge as not as fun or as mundane. And so I feel like that's part of what's interesting about your experience is, and I mean, it just helps for some of us as well, just to listen to it and say, you were doing all the normal mundane things that you were doing in every other part of your life. It's just you had a different perception on those mundane experiences. And that's helpful. And that's part of what I think you're right. Like part of the spiritual life is not going to try and take ayahuasca and make sure you have a really nice mystical experience that you can tell people about. It's learning to bring the experiences that we've had of lucidity through prayer, through centering prayer, through meditation, through whatever, bringing those into our daily felt experience of our life. How would you say?
Yeah, it's well said. Yeah, you said it well. I don't know if I have anything to add to that. Perfect. That's great.
Yeah, well, great. Okay. Well, so question then, as it relates to how did you make the choice to move into psychology?
Yeah. Well, I thought about, undergrad in English and books. And I just thought, what I really love about books so much is all the lessons they're like parables, that they teach us and how that can help us in our life. And so I was like, oh, well, that's psychology. And I really value and appreciate, one-on-one deep connection and talking about our emotions and all these things. And, day-to-day life, people aren't, very open about these things. And so I was like, we can actually hopefully get into that in counseling and, really do that deep inner work and, help break up that stagnation and help impel that growth.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, I didn't know that you had originally had a thought of doing philosophy psychology and or theology. And then just because of where you were in your life at that time, you said, no, thanks. I don't want to get into that. So now after all these experiences, it's given you a new awareness and or appreciation of actually moving into it. So would you say is there any bit of fear and or that you're facing as you stepped into it, or do you feel slightly different about it? But
oh yeah, absolutely. I think, before the experience, I would have been like, no way. And now I'm like, I think I can do this, but there's still, there's still part of me that, I want to have all the answers. I want to be able to tell people exactly what they need to do and, meet everybody where they're at and find what is best for this person. But I know that that's not always going to happen, and that it's, psychology, what you really learn is that you're not the expert. Everybody's the expert in their own life. And how I see it is you're helping them listen to the spirit inside of them, the Spirit of God, and help them hear that so that they can learn to trust that and go on their way and guide themselves.
Yeah.
And of course we'll always have other people around us, and that's important. But I think that what's most important is to have that connection relationship yourself, and to you can your own life better than anyone else.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I can just see how your lucid experiences allowed you to experience what it feels like to be both non-resistant and non-hurried,
Right.
relaxed,
Yeah.
and not having to have the answers, and being able to talk with people like the atheist friend that you noted, where it's like you didn't have to try and convince him of anything, nor did you have the desire or feeling to. And so it's interesting that, you've had the experience of what it feels like to be, I mean, like you said, an effective counselor, psychotherapist, that allows people to come to an awareness of I don't want to say their own answers, but we all know the empowerment and the effect of people being able to come to realizations in and of themselves with someone walking them through it with good questions, etc.
Right.
So that just feels like your experiences have primed you to be able to do that well. But then there's a part of you that, of course, just like all of us, that says, oh man, I just need to have all the answers and be able to tell them what's going on and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So where are you headed? What is your goal? Like, where would you like to see yourself here in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, man. Well, I still play around with different ways of being a therapist, or ways I could help people. I'm not sure exactly, and for the first time in my life, I think, that's okay. Like it's, I'm trying to take it one step at a time. But as far as if I have any idea, just have my own private practice, being a counselor, and you have to meet people where they're at and focus on what they want to focus. But what my bent toward is like deep psychotherapy and really, helping people do the inner work, the shadow work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Another question, or coming to the end of this episode, want to hear your thoughts of what has led you to want to start this podcast, and what are your goals? What are you looking to do as you go throughout these episodes?
Yeah, I think first off, just to have a platform to help other people know that it's okay to go through these stages of your faith and have doubts and questions and form different beliefs, and explore different things, and that's okay. And to, hopefully make people feel like they're not alone, and to kind of build connections and community. And, as I go forward, I want to interview other people and, get their own experiences and see what we can learn from them, and just making that connection. And yeah, I think everybody's got a story and got lessons to teach each other. And so helping us find our connections between different people and different beliefs, and yeah, just what we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, well, I think, I will sometimes be helping by way of asking questions when it's helpful, as well as getting to be a part of some interviews that I know you'll do with folk. So for myself, but then also for the listeners, I mean, we appreciate you being willing to share your story with us, through this episode. I think I can say for myself that it's actually super helpful to hear it all explained as to, where you've come from these last few years, and what's led you to be where you are right now. It's actually really helpful. It's actually, and not just helpful, it's actually the experiences that you've had illuminate particular aspects for all of us that I think we can learn from, but they also illuminate particular experiences that we've had, and to help us be able to say, yeah, I've actually had an experience that's kind of similar to that, so that's really helpful. And I think just on behalf of all the listeners, we're looking forward to all the coming interviews that you have with folk. I mean, of course, I know some of the people who you'll have on here, and it's going to be fantastic. So looking forward to all that.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate you being here today. And of course, you've been huge in my own journey, and you're the first person I told this story to, and helped me articulate it and put it all together. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm really looking forward to the future episodes. And I'm looking forward to all the great guests. So yeah, that ends our podcast today. Hope to see you all soon.
Yep. Thanks.